In this presentation, we're going to look at one of the most sort of basic and fundamental things that you do when you're doing integrated guidance, which is to create information, online career information. And so we're going to look at a bit about how you might go about doing that. So let's start by thinking about what we mean by career information. So career information describes the range of ways in which individuals find out about what's going on in the education system, in the labour market, and in the rest of the world. And we need this kind of information to help us make decisions and to develop strategies around our careers. Now, one of the key roles of the careers professional is to help people to source and interpret this kind of career information. But the internet also offers us a very important new role. This is a printing press, and the internet essentially issues every single person in the world with a printing press. So not only can we identify information that other people have created, we can also create information ourselves. And so that then offers the careers professional a different kind of role, a role not just as someone who helps the interpretation of career information, but somebody who actively creates it. So what can we know? Well, one of the challenges with information is deciding what kind of information is actually relevant and useful to provide people with. And what we know is that the labour market is very complex, and so Bright and Pryor would call this a chaotic system. It's something where we don't necessarily know what the consequences are going to be. So if a company, for example, increases its number of employees, we don't know what the full impact of that will be on the local economy. It could be, for example, that the increase in employees in one company puts a number of other companies out of business, and that ultimately results in a loss of jobs. And because of this, we need to think about how we interpret information very, very carefully. And so I think we have to accept that when we're thinking about the labour market and about people's careers, we can never fully know what's going on. But what we can do is try and discern patterns that serve as a basis for action. The problem with that is that if we simplify very complex patterns, it can sometimes provide us with misleading insights. And so I think one of the consequences of this is that we need to provide people with quite a lot of information, and also to help them to recognise some of the patterns. And probably one of the things that we need to be teaching people to do, a career management skill, is to help them in the recognition of patterns for themselves. So we've got a couple of different sorts of responses to this. So on one hand, we can view our role as being a tour guide, with somebody who helps people to find their way to and make sense of useful and usable information. But another approach is to view ourselves to view the individuals that we're working with as map makers. So we are really about teaching people how to make effective maps, developing career management skills. So if we think about our role as tour guides, we can now become content creators. And so we can do a number of different things as content creators. We can identify useful existing information. We can point people towards things that currently exist. We can add an interpretive layer where we give people a bit more information about something that's out there, help them to understand what it means, and then we can actively create new information. Now, before you do any of this, you need some kind of online space to work with. You need somewhere that you can publish information to. And that actually becomes then a key tool for careers professionals, is to be competent in publishing information to the web. And there are lots of different tools that we might use to do that. WordPress would be one, which is a blogging tool. Just using Facebook would be another, or using something like Google Documents. Now, there are many, many others that you could use, but I think the first thing you need is to find somewhere where you can publish information that is public. So if we think about the identification of useful information, what we're talking about here is creating something like an online repository for useful links. We might want to make sure that we keep that up to date, and then we might try and categorize that information to help you and your clients to make use of it. And actually, when we do that categorization, we're really moving into the next level where we're thinking about how we create an interpretive layer. So we're finding things that we think are useful and we're making them available online to our clients. So if we want an example of this, this is a school website from the UK, and what they've done is, you can go and visit it, but what they've done is create a series of categories where they've just put links to other websites which they think are useful for their students. So you might want to create something like this in your institution. Our second layer is about, our second sort of approach is about adding an interpretive layer to career information that's already available. So if we think, I found a useful video here, which is a video of someone talking about becoming a fashion buyer. It's an interesting kind of careers video where somebody tells you about their job. And I've then shared it with people on Twitter. And I've said, this is a really useful resource about becoming a fashion buyer. Everyone interested in a career in fashion should watch it. And then I provided a link to it. So that little bit of text that I've given there is an interpretive layer. I'm calling attention to a particular resource that's out there, and I'm also identifying who might find that particularly useful. And in doing that, I'm adding a little bit of value to this video that already exists. And one of the bits of value that I'm adding is that I'm endorsing it as somebody who is a careers professional. I'm saying, actually, if you're interested in career and if you trust me, then you should also have a look at this resource. But we might then start to provide deeper levels of interpretation. So in this, I've posted this same video to Facebook, and I've said lots of people dream of being a fashion buyer. Say Hart actually made it, and it's great to watch this film to see how she did it. But it's also important to recognise that this is a competitive field and that work is concentrated in London and the South East. Make sure you do your research if you're interested in following in Zaha's footsteps. So in this example, the interpretive layer that I've put on is trying to help people to think about and interpret this resource. So by adding a bit more text, I'm saying, okay, this is a useful resource, yes, but actually I'm also providing a bit more labour market information by saying, where is that found? Well, that actually comes from the same web page, but I'm drawing that out. Where are these jobs found? And then highlighting the fact that these are competitive, and then encouraging my clients or my students to do some research if they're interested in pursuing this. So I'm no longer just pointing to the resource and saying it's great. I'm trying to provide a context within which someone interprets that. And as you can see from this, the provision of a level of interpretation does not necessarily require you to put a lot of text on. So it may be that you can actually, with a sentence, a couple of sentences, or a short paragraph, you can really provide a lot of additional value for resources that you find online. Okay, if we then move on to the idea of creating new information, which is a sort of, I suppose, perhaps one of the most frightening things that you can do when you start to think about how do you provide career information online. Well, we can do things like we can provide a new fact, we can share an inspiring anecdote, we can give a piece of advice that perhaps you regularly are providing face-to-face. You could put that down in a blog and put that online. We might want to set something out clearly. For example, these are the 5 steps in order to write a good CV or get a job. We might want to analyze or interpret something, asking perhaps, what does this statistic really mean? So, okay, 20% of people have been successful in getting this job. Well, what does that actually mean? And then we also might want to do something like write something controversial to get debate or discussion going. So how do other people do this? Well, I've provided here a series of links to what I think are some really good careers blogs that you might want to go and have a look at. I think all of them are worth looking at. Some of them are blogs that are written by individuals, others by, there's a couple by University Careers Services. And I think if you just search for careers blogs, you'll find there are hundreds of blogs and websites out there. And I think each of them can give you some ideas for creating content. So if we then think about how we actually go about writing on the web, so once we've got something to say, we've decided what we want to say, well, there's some basic rules that I've got from a site on usability, web usability, which are things like use the words that your users use, chunk your content, so use short sentences, try not to have any pages that are too long, Perhaps put things under subheadings and that sort of thing. Front load the important information, so put whatever you think is most important, make that the first paragraph. Try and use pronouns, so talk about the user as you, the career service as we. Use active voice, so the board proposed the legislation, not the regulation was proposed by the board, that kind of thing. So try and be as direct as you can. Use short sentences and paragraphs. Use bullets and numbered lists, clear headings and subheadings. Use images, diagrams or multimedia to represent things in the content, and try and make sure there's some white space on the page. What somebody once told me was that if you write an article that you're going to put it onto the web, once you've written it, go back and try and make it half as long, and then look at it again and try and make it half as long again. Now you might achieve that in a whole load of ways. You might want to separate one article out into two articles or whatever. But the point is, people don't read loads and loads of material online, so they like to make it needs to be simple. It needs to be clear. So I've talked a bit about blogging here, and blogging is really a very easy thing to do. If you enroll on a site like WordPress, essentially you'll find that actually the technical side of it is very much like using something like Word. So if you want to start posting, if you want to start blogging, really it's just a question of thinking of something to say and writing it and posting it. And so the tips that I've learned, and I've been blogging now for, well, probably about a decade. I think the first thing is post your first post. So just take the plunge. It doesn't have to be perfect. Write something. Just think of the thing that you tell students or tell your clients most commonly, and write it down and put it as a post on your blog, just to try it out. Probably no one will look at your first post for quite a long while. And then you go and you post your second post. So try and get into a regular rhythm. So perhaps you're going to post every week or every day or even every month. But if you start doing it less than that, it starts to become very easy just to stop doing it all. So this idea of posting regularly is a really important discipline. And as I say, if you look at my blog, there are many things on it which are very short. They're just a link to something or just a comment. But I think as a blogger, you need to stay on topic. So if you're writing a careers blog, if you're going to talk about something other than careers, you need to be really careful, and you need to explain to your audience why you've moved from the topic that you're usually talking about. You want to write short posts as well as longer ones. Try and keep it interesting and varied. So put different types of posts on. Use anecdotes and stories rather than just present facts to people. And then I think be willing to be controversial. If you're comfortable with that, you don't have to do that, but if you're comfortable with that, a blog which says something potentially that people might disagree with is really powerful. It will definitely get looked at much more. And write in a way that invites a response. So if you're writing a blog, you want to encourage people to respond to you. So I often finish blogs with, I don't know about you, but what do you think about this? I'd be really interested to hear what people have got to say, that kind of thing. And the other thing that you do with blogs is make sure you link to lots of useful content. So blogs are really important as ways of linking to other content. So I've provided a few references here to some of the things that I've been drawing on, and I will then just summarise now. So career information is a really important part of careers work. It's a key part of your integrated blend. The internet allows you to be a content creator as well as a consumer, and you can create a variety of content ranging from just links to really comprehensive web resources. Clear, engaging writing is central to your ability to provide useful content. Thank you for listening.